need somebody to lean on.
Our goals for this workshop, just sort of the three things we're going to do in this limited amount of time here, is we're going to talk about what is the crisis that teenage boys are facing and why does it matter. We're going to spend some time talking about what you can do specifically. What's your role? What can any of us do to make a difference? And we're also going to talk about what Boys to Men Tucson is doing. And hopefully that will also help you all to figure out what you want to do, what you can do with us or just in general in your own community. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do, we are going to do a check-in. And at Boys to Men Tucson and a lot of other Boys to Men organizations and men's work, this is how we start every circle. This is how we start everything we do. And so today it's going to be real specific, and it's going to be probably a little bit difficult for you to zone in on these precise instructions. So it's a little bit of a challenge right out of the gate. So here's how it's going to go. You're going to say your name. Then you're going to say two emotions that you can feel in your body right now. Two emotions, without context, without story, without explanation. So that can be hard, right? It's really vulnerable to just say the two feelings and stand in them, without giving a context. But that's the request. And then the last part, and this is going to be hard too, might be hard. What is it that brings you here today? What is it? What connects you? What are you hoping for? In 5 words or less. Right, so today we're going to talk about community. It's a community workshop for healthy masculinity for the next generation is what we're focusing on. And we'll get into that. Again, our goals are to understand what we're talking about as the crisis facing boys today, talk about its impact, identify the things that you can do to help. You should feel like you understand what you can do and what your role is and what your capacity is by the time that we're done with this. And you should also understand what Boys to Men is doing to address the problem. So this is what we're talking about, right? The crisis facing teenage boys today. And I would say facing teenage boys and men. And we'll get deeper into this as we go here. But when I'm talking about the crisis, things I just want to say are, when we're talking about the rates of suicide, of teenage boys, of depression, substance abuse, addiction, across a range of health outcomes, boys are just faring much, much worse than women. There are ways that women in our community are doing worse, as well too. But I'm focusing in on some real specific things that teenage boys are facing, especially when it comes to mental health. And then when we don't have any support or even acknowledgement of our mental health struggles, all of the things we end up doing to try to treat it and make ourselves feel better or hide it or move around it, that creates all of these complicating issues of suffering that really impacts our whole community. But I would say the same thing too, that in a lot of ways, we could have this conversation about grown men as well. And in a lot of ways, you'll see that the real spirit of where we're coming from in this is if we can show up for our boys with a lot of heart and thoughtfulness and commitment, that we can prevent a ton of the really pressing problems in our community that are going on right now with grown men. So for this conversation, we're going to talk about, when I'm talking about the crisis and the thing that is putting pressure on teenage boys that is creating just these really disproportionate rates of suffering between boys and girls in the United States, concentrated in teenage boys, I suppose. The things we're going to talk about are masculinity, adolescence, which of course is a factor we all can identify with our own period of that time in our life and just how wild it is, how much change is there. Social and cultural pressures, more generally, that we'll talk about that are going on right now. And then we're going to talk about intersections and how all of this stuff is kind of really complicated and intensified by whole other stuff that we don't have enough time to talk about today, but that really matters. And I hope that in that intersections piece, we have a chance to talk about really specifically what's going on in Tucson and what the boys in this community are facing. So let's get into it. And we'll spend most of our time talking about masculinity. So when I'm talking about masculinity, and we're not doing a super deep dive into this, but just so that we're all on the same page, we're talking about the idea that gender is a spectrum, and masculinity and femininity are on it. Masculinity, a lot of times in our society, is what we associate with boys and men. It's kind of a way to think about it for the purpose of our conversation today is, what are the unspoken assumptions and beliefs and rules? Rules we never talk about, but if you see a man doing this, it feels really weird because I never see men doing that. That's something I expect to see someone else kind of do. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. We're talking about masculinity in this context is talking about what are those rules? What are those expectations specifically in the United States right now, right? Because they're different at different times and places. But what are they right now? Because it's going to help us to think about how that creates certain pressures on boys and how it interacts with the other things that we're going to talk about. And so we're going to talk about toxic masculinity in particular. And for some folks, that can be kind of a hot button issue. It can be a controversial issue. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we mean when we're talking about toxic masculinity. So I want to try to, for the purposes of this conversation, create a little bit more of a simple way to think about it. There are all kinds of elements of masculinity and being a man that are beautiful, that are righteous, that help us, that feel good, that are wonderful, that are good. So when we talk about toxic masculinity, all we're really talking about is what are the rules, the pressures, the beliefs about being a man that we've inherited largely that cut us off from being whole and being well. What are the pressures? What are the rules that maybe I inherited from my dad, that he inherited from his grandpa, that keep me from taking very reasonable actions to be happy, to have love in my life, to make my life better? Y'all with me on that? I'm gonna stop and take just the temperatures. Anybody?
Around. I'm like, how the hell? Why are they?
Does anybody want to, and I can't see everybody, Landon, so you can see better. Does anybody want to ask a question on that before we go on? Just kind of laying a real basic framework, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, I'm going to go on. You can put it in the chat, and again, you wave and get our attention. That's all good too. So a lot of times, we'll see this particular kind of tool. This one comes from an organization called A Call to Men, and I'm going to share some of the resources. But we'll talk about the man box. And again, the man box is just a way of saying, to the degree that it's not helpful, what are those rules that maybe I've never even thought about in my whole life? I've never even considered them consciously. But they're private, kind of implicit rules that make me feel pressure, consciously or unconsciously, to act in certain ways as a man, right? So it might be like when I'm walking, when I'm running, I might automatically make sure I'm carrying my body in a certain way because I don't want to look feminine when I'm doing that, because I don't want people to make fun of me. Some of the basic stuff might just be like, don't cry. Men don't cry. He's crying. Look, he's going to cry. Va llorar. He's crying, like the ways that from a young age, people might make fun of us, or we might make fun of each other if we see somebody doing something that we would call feminine, or acting like a girl, or gay, or any of the other kind of slurs that we might use to say a man who acts like a woman, or a man who we don't respect, right? And I know that's all kind of a lot and loaded, so I'm just putting it in there to y'all. Sam, I see your question. I love it. So Sam asks, the term masculinity, are we even supposed to use that? So yeah, I think so. I don't think there's anything complicated about that. And that's what I mean. There's such kind of an intense climate around this stuff, I think sometimes there's a lot of misunderstanding. So masculinity is totally fine, right? It's beautiful, nothing wrong with masculinity. When we talk about healthy masculinity versus toxic masculinity, we're just saying, are there rules that we've inherited about being a man that sometimes act on us or we enforce on each other that don't make our lives better? That maybe don't even make that much sense if we give it a ton of thought. So let me give y'all some examples, and then I'm going to ask y'all to give me some examples. So I'll be a little bit cartoonish just to make it real obvious, and then maybe we can talk about some stuff that's, not so cartoonish. But I think about, and maybe you've known a man like this in your life, men who more or less think it's gay, right? Which in the first place is a major taboo. Cannot be gay, right? That's very upsetting. I'm going to come to you, Luis. I see it. But men who think it's gay or negative or feminine, right, to eat salad, that might be like a little bit silly, but really, right, there are men all the time, I've probably done it at some point in my life, who feel self-conscious or feel there's gendered pressure to order certain food, say at a restaurant. I can think of an example. I remember ordering a salad with some of my friends in high school, and I'm laughing about it, but they ridiculed me. They're like, oh, you like ice cream? You like bunny rabbits? That stuff where it's like, I say it's like playful, but it's rooted in this system of policing each other around how we're behaving and what's okay and what's not okay. And so what I would say, Luis, to answer your question is violent masculinity is an expression of what we're calling toxic masculinity for the sake of this conversation. Which isn't to say, right, there may be some situations where somebody has to be violent for, really legitimate reasons, but, abusive behavior, yeah, and sort of feeling like you need to fight. Nobody better disrespect me under any circumstances. And if they do, I have to prove it. Why? Because my manhood's on the line. And if my manhood is in question, people won't love me, people won't respect me, I might not be safe. And this is the thing the point, right, is to shape how is there pressure on teenage boys that is hurting them, that we can do something about. Is to put it like this, and I said I was going to give you all a chance to share, so I will here. Just give me a second. My son, who's 4 now, I took him to the beach when he was 2 with me and a bunch of family. And one of our family members had brought back this silk, Japanese dress for my daughter. And it was beautiful because they had taken a trip to Japan. And my son was 2, and my son loved it. And he wore it. And he wore it all over the beach. He thought it was the most beautiful thing ever, and it was. It was beautiful colors, beautiful material, and he didn't think anything about it, He's just like, it's something that's beautiful. I'm going to wear it. I enjoy it. And some of our family members really got genuinely upset, and they were like, take it off. Take it off. Take that off. Don't dress like that's not okay. And they were upset. And so imagine for a 2-year-old little boy trying to understand the world he lives in when the adults are turning serious and scared and mad because of some fine nuance about his body, the identity they've given him, his identity as a boy, as a man. And he's learning right away, like, oh man, there's something pretty serious here about what to do and what not to do. And it's happening on a million levels all the time, right? On a million levels. Like, he doesn't cry. Like, look at him. He's what a little man. People are lifting him up. He doesn't cry. Look at him. He didn't even cry. My son doesn't even cry. Oh, look at him. He's got all those little girlfriends. There's all this stuff. So that at an early age, he's getting all these emotional rewards and punishments for certain kind of really specific behavior. Crying isn't really a gendered experience. Crying is a human experience. But we in this culture and society put a tremendous amount of pressure onto one population from the time that they are still children to stop crying in front of other people. And what's that do to us? What's that climate do to us? What does that do to me totally unconsciously? How do I stop showing up for myself? because I'm being taught that natural feelings and things that come up out of me are shameful. So I wonder, and we can do this through raising hands. We can do this through a variety of ways, or the chat box. My question is, can anybody here identify an example that you've observed or in your personal life where a really reasonable behavior is kind of punished or called out as not being okay for a boy or a man to do it? And I think what's specifically, Rich, if you can think of it, is when you were a kid, or if you've seen it with another kid. Because I think that's what's the rich part, is to identify, how's this going on from just a really young age? And have you ever seen any example of the kind of thing I'm talking about, or can you think of one? And then just put your hand up if you want to share, and we'll point you out.
So I got an example. Actually, it was when I was a little kid that happened to me. But I have a brother, and I was good friends with my brother at the time. But like strong friendships with other guys, he's seen as gay, which would be what people would pick on us for, which is shocking and strange.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It's a great example. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to growing up, and my dad would tell me stories about like how abusive his stepfather was. And I always got the feeling when he was telling me these things that, they were all, kind of masculine related things, like, in the toxic sense, like, um, kind of homophobic stuff, or, like not obeying authority, or, whatever. But it was always this sort of like, it had like this kind of threatening undertone to it, like this could be you sort of thing. And it was like I was almost like thinking now back, I'm like wondering if that was an opportunity that, like, he was like, I didn't get this sort of like this consideration for my humanity growing up.
Right.
Instead of like trying to open that up, it just seemed like it was like, like sort of like, be quiet about what you're doing, and just know that you've got it good.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you, Nick. That's great. I want to recognize Sam's share, which I think is it's a great share. And I see Alex is coming in too. So Sam said, for me personally, I tried to hold open a door for an adult male at a gas station. The man got offended and made me question myself and my good intent. And that's really intense to think about as a kid. What a reasonable, polite, kind behavior. And you're a child, and somebody makes you feel fundamentally ashamed, insecure, scared about that choice, because there's something you're not getting right about a whole code about who we are kind to, intimate with, vulnerable to, and who we never do that with. That it's wrong, right? And about holding the door open. So it's an awesome example. It's super loaded. Alex said some boys would be so uncomfortable about the fact that Josh and I were close brothers. Okay. It just didn't fit with how they saw men and boys should act. Exactly, right? In a lot of places, even historically for sure, but even now, it's really common. I taught in Colombia, South America for a while. It's really common for boys who are friends in a completely platonic way to hold hands, to hang out at recess and lay their head on each other's shoulder and to like stroke each other's head. Teenage boys without the slightest romantic sexual connotation at all. And that's just good, healthy affection. You know, there's a ton of research that'll tell you about how men and boys in the United States are affection starved, and it's killing them. It's connected to all this stuff. And then what you see there is a burden placed on the women in our lives to be everything. And I'll tell you, that's a bad paying job. That's not a good job. So I'm going to skip ahead here. I'm going to have to go way too fast, y'all, so that we can get on everything, because I see we could really spend time. So this is kind of an intense quote. If it feels too intense to you and you're like, that's crazy, I don't believe it, that's fine. Don't feel like you got to. But I feel like there's good stuff. And I just want to recognize Nick, who is a brand new dad, who's rocking his baby right there. And I think that's beautiful, man. That's some healthy masculinity in action for sure. And appreciate you being on the call and everything in light of that, Nick. So Bell Hooks, she's an author who writes about this stuff, and she basically says what's at stake, and not in all homes, right? This doesn't happen everywhere. I'm not saying, it's not that all boys are getting this really brutal upbringing, but a lot of us are. And a lot of it is subtle, and because it's okay in our society, we might not notice it. A lot of it happens beneath our own radars. So she said, the first act of violence that patriarchy, which is just another way for our purposes of talking about this kind of old school gender roles. The first act of violence that patriarchy demands of males is not violence towards women. Instead, it demands of all males that they engage in acts of psychic self-mutilation, that they kill off the emotional parts of themselves. If an individual isn't successful in emotionally crippling himself, he can count on patriarchal men to enact rituals of power that will assault his self-esteem. Now, if that sounds wacko or loaded, you know, what she's saying, man, is you better stop crying. You better stop caring too much. There's just a whole bunch of rules that you better put in yourself hard by the time you're hitting adolescence and becoming a teenager. Because if you don't, people are going to make fun of you. You know, and all I've done is men's work for most of my life. And just the amount of stories like what we're talking about of just fathers being really mean to their son in lasting and damaging ways because he did something that violated these rules that he didn't even know about. And so that's what Bell Hooks is talking about. You better hurt yourself into this pretty narrow box so that you'll get love and respect. And that's the thing. If you'll put yourself in this narrow box, you will get a lot of rewards. Men will love you. They'll lift you up. Look at him, man. He's a bad man. He doesn't care about anything. He'll fight anybody. He doesn't even feel pain. And we'll lift him up. So you can get what you want. And in fact, that's the tragedy. A lot of times it's the only way you can get what you want, because we have to have love and we have to have respect and we have to be held in high esteem by the people close to us. And if the only way that we can get those things is to become a two-dimensional killing machine or whatever, you know, that's an exaggeration, but we're going to do it. And so the point is to create worlds in which boys don't have to do those things to get the things they need. I see parts saying, it was in grade school where I learned competition with other guys during a sleepover, where the cool thing was about how well you attracted girls. Programs of competition got encoded in me then, right? That's a big part of it, comparing ourselves to each other. I'm a man to the degree that I can be more of a man than you are. And that's a big part of it. I'll tell you a lot in the men's work I've done. You'd be surprised when we all get real with each other, how many men have had sex not because they wanted to, but so that they could tell another man they had sex. Even when there's research on it, men having more sex that they don't want to have for that reason. It's kind of mind-blowing, and it's definitely something we don't always talk about. Let's keep going. So this is from a recent survey. You know, when asked what traits society values most in boys, only 2% of men said honesty and morality. So we're just talking about, you know, we might take it for granted, but just trying to become more aware. What's the climate? And how is this impacting boys during a really critical journey in their life and making it hard for them to come out okay in this society, right? It's not this place everywhere and for all folks. So right here, this says toxic masculinity health outcomes. And here in a second, Landon's going to give you a poll on it. But this is just some of what we know is connected to boys who either grow up and identify really closely with these sort of gender stereotypes and feel a lot of pressure, or boys who grow up around other men that do. So less likely to achieve in school, low self-esteem, loneliness, mental illness. So we're talking about a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety amongst teenage boys today, through the roof, and men as well. And oftentimes not treated because there's a stigma about men and mental health and getting services. I think less than 1/3 of all people in therapy in the United States are men. Public violence, the issue of school shootings. We got to ask ourselves, yeah, there might be an issue of guns there, but why is school shooting 100% the domain of boys and men? What does it mean when we're raising groups differently and one group does this pretty scary thing and the other group doesn't do it? It's probably connected to how we're raising them. Gender-based violence, men who are raised and identify with this stuff are at way through the roof rates of hurting their family, hurting their partners, committing sexual assault, which is a pandemic on college campuses. Heart disease, right? Don't eat a salad, don't go to the doctor. That stuff's through the roof. Addiction, because we can't ask for help, and so we end up trying to do all these things to make ourselves feel better because it's not okay to be sad, it's not okay to be upset, and that's where addiction comes in a lot of times. And then suicide, when teenage boys turn 18, 19, their rates of suicide compared to other groups shoots through the roof in the United States. It multiplies by 6 times once they turn 18 during that period of early adulthood. So there's a lot of good information in that. So if you haven't answered that poll, go ahead and answer it. Which of these do you see as the biggest problem facing boys and men in your community, in your own community? Which one do you see?
We got a couple more that need to respond, and then we'll share the results.
I just responded. I hadn't. And you can go ahead, Landon, even if folks haven't. Do it right now, but if you can't, we'll go ahead. Move on. Okay. Yeah. So not everybody responded, but you see some of it. And I think that one, loneliness, is just a big one, man. I know for myself, for a lot of my life, I could only be intimate with a woman. And that meant when I didn't have access to a woman in my life, I was really lonely. And so just being disconnected is a big consequence. Thanks to everybody for doing the poll there. So we talk about this as the cycle of consequences. And again, this is something that A Call to Men uses in an organization. I'll share some resources with you all. But so we've got that man box, right? And remember that basically the rule is don't be vulnerable, don't let your guard down, don't ask for help. In so many ways, that's what's going on there. Be tough, be awesome, be in control, be dominant, be strong, be funny, all the time. Be strong, be hard. Don't let your guard down. And when that's kind of the rules you're living by, you see what a setup it can be, right? So don't ask for help. Don't be vulnerable, right? So maybe somebody dies in my family. Maybe I'm struggling in school. Maybe I'm just tremendously sad. Maybe I have trauma from some stuff that went on in my childhood. Maybe there's some really scary stuff going on in my home, but I can't ask for help. I can't be vulnerable, Everything in my environment is telling me I can't. And we know how that will lead to lack of achievement, right? I'm struggling in school, but I'm not going to talk about it. Is that right, Landon, where you're at with the time? Because I'm wondering if my watch is off. Okay, I got you. I'm just seeing where we are. So I'm not doing well in school all of a sudden. I'm getting in trouble with my teachers. Getting in trouble with my parents. My self-esteem's kind of going down because I'm not doing well. But I still can't ask for help. I've still got to follow the scripts that I'm being given by the other men in my life, and I'm feeling bored and I'm feeling burned out. And why am I going to bother in school if I'm not even doing well anyways? And I might start taking riskier behaviors. I might join with other groups that are doing things that make me feel alive, that make me feel seen. I'll find something I am good at, and it might be a harmful choice, but I'm good at it, and other people will lift me up for it. And so all that sort of creates a context. Of course, then we know that young boys get involved with the criminal justice system, and it all feeds into a cycle. And whether it's boys or men, this is a cycle that's really recurrent in a lot of our communities. And if we want to do something about it, we'll ask ourselves, what do we have to do to create a climate and a culture where boys ask for help? Okay. Shoot into the, let me see what Sam is saying. There are young men who have been raised by women and sit down when they use the toilet. Then society tells these young men to act like a boy man, and they have never been around an adult male. There's a lot going on there, Sam, but absolutely and for sure, What we know is that men, there is a cycle that repeats of not having a man and then also being a man who doesn't show up. And the pandemic in the United States right now is boys who have no access to a reliable, caring adult male. Absolutely. You know, and that's not to throw the women in this community under the bus. They're doing way more than their fair share of labor when it comes to raising boys. But there's men's work. There's men's work to be done. And we'll get into it. But the work of Boys to Men, and I would say forget Boys to Men, but our work as men is to wake each other up. This is our job. This is our job. And until we do it, nobody's going to do it for us. So good point, Sam. So I'm going to zoom through the rest of this stuff like way too fast. You'll probably be like, Michael, what the heck are you doing? The other pressures, just adolescence. Do you remember what happened to your teenage body? Oh my gosh. You know what I'm saying? It's changing. Everything's happening. Moods, emotions, don't understand, feelings, pressures. It's a powder keg, I would say, across times and places unto itself. Social and culture, so I won't get into it, but what cell phones, smartphones, social media, pornography, what these things are compounding to do to the adolescent brain today is we have our work cut out for us if we want to figure out how to shepherd our children into health through adolescence, given these conditions. And I'm not even getting into what we need to do about it, what we can do about it. A lot of people have a lot of different approaches. It's not easy. I'll tell you, it's not easy for me in my own relationship to my smartphone, my social media, etc. You know what I'm saying? And so you can see right here, teens who spend 5 or more hours online were super increased. I'm not reading the whole thing right now, but basically their risks of suicide are through the roof. And there's just a ton of research on this stuff. And it's just to say it's hard. It is a hard and scary time, what social media and smartphones as something that kids don't ever get away from is kind of intensifying all the stuff we're talking about. The last part here, intersections. So I'm not even, and I apologize that we're just not going to be able to get into enough of this with enough time. We do an all-day training, which we'll talk about, and we go way deeper in this. But adverse childhood experiences, and I'll show you a graph on it, but it does all kinds of stuff to the brain. It makes it even harder, no matter who you are and what the circumstances are, to open up, to be vulnerable. It interrupts learning. It depresses the immune system. People that go through childhood trauma are at way increased risks for a host of physical ailments. Just in the briefest way, talking about race and gender, masculinity, manhood, it doesn't mean the same thing for everybody, does it? And all I mean, and I'll just give you the quickest example, and of course I'm saying this as a white man, so there's plenty I probably don't know. But if we were to say, what are the stereotypes, the racist stereotypes that exist for men of color? You know, what are they? It might be, you know, men of color are over emotional. They're untrustworthy. They're impulsive. Those are racist stereotypes, right? Not true, not okay, but they exist in a racist culture at times. You know, they're maybe unconscious beliefs or conscious that sometimes get held and perpetrated against communities of color. And so all I'm saying here is that for a teenage boy who already better not show his emotions or let somebody see him appear weak or be vulnerable or let down his guard, how much more difficult is that for somebody that's also trying to deal with racist stereotypes? And how does it work together to make it feel like, man, I really don't have enough safe space in my life to be whole or to ask for help or let my guard down? Of course, all of this interacts with poverty, sexual identity, intergenerational trauma, the things that families and communities have gone through, and how that gets passed down to us. So all of this interacts and it compounds to create risk and to create struggle, you know, that we have to choose to show up for as a community. And if we don't, it won't happen. And so I'd ask y'all, you know, so I won't go through it because we're going so fast here and so short on time, but this is called the pair of ACEs. So adverse childhood experiences, adverse community environment, whole different kinds of things you can go through or things your family goes through. If we had more time, and we do this in our all-day trainings and a lot of our workshops, we would talk about what in Tucson have we not even touched on yet that these kids are struggling with. You know, we're in 16 schools. I can tell you a lot of what they're going through. You know, what are the border politics? What is the history of this land? What are the different real specific types of trauma, violence that are going on here in Tucson that layer everything we're talking about for these boys? I'm gonna go on just for the sake of time. So we're gonna kind of stop and take a breath in all of this. I'm gonna share some stuff with you. We'll do some breakout rooms, and then we'll come back and we'll hit the back half of Boys to Men stuff real fast. So what are the things that we can do? And after I go through this, Landon's gonna give you guys a poll. So what I want to point out as our role is awareness. And what I mean here is if we don't know about all of this and we don't decide to be literate in any of this, I'm going to have a really hard time showing up in a meaningful way. And y'all are the choir because you're on this workshop. So this is it. Learning, I'm going to share so many resources with y'all on Monday, more than you want probably. But that's it. Just taking this stuff in, learning about it, growing. Why? Because when we do that, we can do this second thing, which is model. But I can't model it. I can't model it if I don't know anything. I can say all the nice words and have all the hopes and dreams, but y'all probably know as well as I do, kids don't do what you say. What do? They do what we do. We do what you know what I mean? It's what we do. And so a lot of times as adults, we want to say, oh, we want you guys to get it right. I want the next generation to get it right. Well, I better show them that that's possible in my own body, in my own life, with my own choices and actions. And if I'm not willing to do that, you know, they're not going to do it. That's just the truth of it. Mentorship, I think in a lot of ways has been historically a really strong value in the United States. It's my 2 cents. We all ought to have people we are mentoring, and we all had to have mentors. It's a part of a healthy life. And I'm not talking about your parents, and I'm not talking about your kids. It's taking responsibility for all of the children in my community. If I'm just doing the best job ever with my kids, that's beautiful and it does matter, don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of kids and they need me to be a guy in their life, just somebody in their life, some kind of way. Promoting, so the messages we're promoting, the things we're sharing, might be social media, but just in general, what are we promoting? That's a way that you can make a difference, because we're talking about creating a climate in which kids and boys feel safe to ask for help, feel safe to talk about their depression, feel safe to open up about how they're suffering, how they're scared, how they're hurting. How do we create that climate? What's our role? And I think, you know, the real answer, where most of us are men, not all of us on this call, but it's a lot of this is on us, you know. Support, so supporting organizations. Boys to Men's one of them. We're not the only one, but supporting organizations that are doing this work. We are trying to build a movement in Southern Arizona where the stuff I'm talking about becomes normal. It becomes normal, and people are involved in this all over the place. So supporting those organizations. And the thing I want to say is when we prioritize this stuff as an individual, then bit by bit by bit, this is how we make change in my neighborhood, change in my city, change in Southern Arizona, change in my state, change in our communities to give our boys a better shot. So let me ask you, of all these things, which one of those things gives you the most energy right now? Just listening. Which one of those things gives you the most energy, feels like, okay, yeah, that feels right for me right now. That feels like where I'm at. Everybody answer that question real quick. And then go ahead and here in just a second, give us the results.
All right, here we go.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Great, man. That's great. That's a part of it. Knowing what is there for us. And if we know that, then we can go ahead and make some choices and take some steps. So here's what we're going to do right now, guys. We're going to break out into breakout rooms. So we're going to just divide you up and send you out, you know, if you don't feel like you have to. We're going to take 7 minutes. We're going to take 7 minutes to just talk. And I want to say, to open up, maybe take 30 seconds or so, each of you, a minute, and just make sure everyone has a chance to really share. How's this hitting for you? How's this landing? What are you feeling? What feels good? What are you afraid of? What are you hoping for? Just share in your small groups what this is bringing up for you. And we're going to come back. We'll come back at 4:05.
It was a grand experiment.
Yeah, it was. Great. All right. Do we look loosely accounted for?
Yes, we are.
I'd say 90% return rate is adequate. All right. So in a brief way, we're just going to take a few minutes. So I would ask for a representative or just somebody to want to, like, what went on in your group, what came up, what resonated for you, and just take about a minute. Kai, I see you. Good to see you, buddy.
Hey, what's up?
So just share what went on in your breakout room, and just take about a minute so that we can hear from a few folks, because we're just going to take 5 minutes before we move on. And just jump in there whenever you're ready.
Hey, in our breakout room, we just discussed the differences. All of us are educators, and we all believe in trying to engage, and we discuss the differences in terms of how we interact and our perspectives of how things are right now, since we're all dealing with this COVID-19 stuff.
Great, thank you, Sam. What else? What came up in breakout group?
So in our room, Barth and I were talking about how this is ongoing work, and how there can be a lot of guilt, right, embedded in that work for mistakes that we've made in the past. But at the same time, there's all these beautiful aspects of what we've done, right? So Barth and I were sharing, like, I'm a dad, but he's not. But then there's commonalities in the experience of being men of color, and how there has to be safety in being able to share the experience of our masculinity, and that it's not the same, right? And those nuances are important. It's about creating those spaces to be able to connect and understand those nuances, but at the same time, look at the broader connections that can be made.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. That's wonderful. Really appreciate that. Anybody else got anything cooking thus far? We're about to take a pivot. Anything came out of your break room? Anything you're holding on to you just want to share before we turn a corner here? Okay, you wave at me or you use the chat box if you want to. So what we're going to do right now is I am going to share with you all a video. And this is going to help us pivot into the next part we're talking about here. Let me just see. Great. And this is just sort of a video about us and our work, which is, it's going to do a better job in a better amount of time than I could do. And that'll let us talk from it's a video that's about 5 minutes long.
Junior high can be an especially awkward time for boys, and while heading rapidly towards manhood, they are still boys. Know this, 1 in every 4 of them is living in a household without a dad. Many young boys will figure it out and do well, but most will struggle because they have no solid male role model in their lives. For them, Boys to Men Tucson has a message.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. If we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
So Boys to Men Mentoring is different than any other mentoring organization. This is a place where you can be seen, heard, where what you say is held in confidence, it's respected, we will honor that, and you can show up. I call it real, ready, and raw.
Pass. Boys to Men Tucson is part of a U.S. nonprofit started almost 25 years ago. It was a response to a nationwide crisis of fatherless boys.
It's really important for young people not only to have a father figure, but a brother, an uncle, cousin.
Ron Wilson is a vice president at the University of Arizona and is on the board of directors of Tucson's Boys to Men.
The organization has been around for a very long time, and there are chapters of this organization across the country. And if you were to look at what this organization does locally as well as nationally, they are the gold standard.
Every mentor undergoes a background check and evaluation. Now, at the heart of the program are these once-a-week talking circles.
You feel more like a part of a team, like you're actually like something out there, not just by yourself, always doing it by yourself.
Marcelino Martinez knows all about that feeling of loneliness. When he was Christopher's age, his life was filled with chaos. He joined the Boys to Men mentoring group in his high school. Now he is a mentor.
They're not going to steer you wrong. They're giving you wind to guide your own sail. You're controlling the boat. It's your journey. They're just showing you which way the wind's blowing for you, which way the tide is taking you.
So when we round up, 60 mentors next week, and we go into the 12 schools that we're into, and we go into the juvenile detention center and do this work we're doing, and we just sit down and spend time with the boys, I know that we're doing upstream work around a lot of the crises that are going on today just by spending that time.
The work volunteer mentors do goes beyond the talking circles in a school.
We're at the Cooper Center, Boys to Men. This is our adventure week. So that's the all aboard activity. This is really just giving a challenge that they have to come up with a unique solution to. So with that, we're trying to get them all onto the platform with nobody touching the ground. And they had to guess, determine, or challenge themselves how many of them they could get on at once. This is my calling. I've been working with troubled youth in particular, but youth at risk for about 25 years. And I do this volunteer because I've got my own son who's a young man and needs this sort of community. I feel like I'm building community.
There's so many different reasons why it's smart, whether you're a parent who wants to ensure that your daughter is going to have a strong, responsible young man to court her and marry her, when they're ready. These are the programs that are going to ensure that those men are available. Whether you're someone in the community that cares about crime, these are the programs that are going to reduce crime in your community. Whether you're a business owner that's looking for a workforce, that's going to be compassionate and caring, and that's going to be educated and articulate. This is the type of program that's going to produce young people that you're going to want to hire.
Ron Wilson says the words of social reformer Frederick Douglass are as true today as they were 100 years ago, when he said, "It is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men."
Okay. Got kind of a little cushion. It's all right. Awesome. So that, like I said, that's a better, more direct kind of presentation on who we are and what we're about, faster and more efficient than I can give you. But let me tell you a little bit more about us and kind of what we're doing. And the thing I want to say, because I'm going to go really fast because we are short on time and I want to be really respectful of everyone's time. So I won't hit all the points I was going to hit. But the thing I just want to say, what's important to us at Boys to Men is to really provide leadership in our communities to the degree that we can about making this movement normal, where men show up for all of the boys in our community. Not some of them, not the ones I know, not the ones in my neighborhood, but where all the men in this community know that it's our responsibility to show up for all of the boys. And it can look a lot of different ways, but that's really what it's all about. We're really devoted to creating intergenerational communities devoted to healthy masculinity is one way to talk about it. And what does that mean? It just means to creating a normative culture throughout our communities, which isn't to say it doesn't already exist in some places, but to make sure it exists everywhere, where the men in the community feel a collective responsibility and mandate for all of the boys. And what I want to say is that has been a timeless and transcendent part of most communities across the world. You know, one of my good friends, Chucho Ruiz, who is a leader in our community, he always says, you know, indigenous peoples' practices are human practices. You know, they are practices from different indigenous communities across the world. The role of rite of passage work, right? Rite of passage work across communities that at a certain point in time, all of the men knew that they would need to come for boys when they reached a certain threshold in life to, in some sort of way, initiate them into a very intentional and thoughtful process on their journey to become a man. And they did it in specific, thoughtful ways, and it was an institutionalized practice in communities because our well-being depended on it. And it's something that in a lot of communities in the United States is gone now. And so our work is to help wake each other up to the fact that that's our role, that's our work. This is a proverb from a tribe, which is that if the boys aren't initiated into manhood, they will burn down the village just to feel the heat. And in so many ways, when you look at the cycle of boys who are abandoned, neglected, if not physically, emotionally, right? Maybe there's a man in my house, but he doesn't care about me. He's not emotionally awake himself because he's got his own unrepressed trauma or undealt with whatever. And so he's not showing up. And in some kind of way, there's an absence and something's missing. And I'm going to go out there and find it, you know, one way or the other. Me and my buddies are going to go out there and we're going to feel alive and we're going to feel the heat. And if we can either feel it because the men show up to help us get there the right way, or we'll figure it out ourselves, you know? And so it puts the responsibility back on us as men. And that is our work at Boys to Men, to wake each other up to that as men. And there's a range of ways that we do that. So school-based mentorship is the biggest thing we do. You know, this past year we were in 16 schools plus the juvenile detention center. And every single week, you know, we had over 60 men who would show up every single week at the exact same time and place across the community and sit in a circle. 3 or 4 men, 10 or 12 boys. We train them all. We background check them all. We make sure everyone's ready to go and sit for an hour and practice some really radical stuff where people open up, they let their guard down, and they share truths that they might have never believed they would be able to share. And they get support and validation from older men who are trained and showing up every single week, consistent, reliable, caring. And that's transformative. You know, that breaks intergenerational cycles. If I didn't get that growing up, but I can give that to another boy, I'm changing the trajectory of what was going to happen, aren't I? Right? When we do that for each other, we can transform our communities. I'm not going to read through this. This stuff's on our website. It's the schools that we're in. We're in juvenile detention. That's new. But we don't want to just be in schools. This work needs to exist in our communities. You know, our goal, Boys to Men's, not anything special. Communities have this knowledge. Communities have this wisdom, have this know-how, have the resources. We're just available to help you get circles going, to help you plant circles, to help you figure out how to hold this work in your own community. That's all we exist to do. I'll just tell you quickly the things we don't do, because this is beautiful. You can take this little part out of the workshop, and this can bless your life this week. And I'm starting with, this is our mentorship model. There's 4 things we don't do, and there's 4 things we do. And we start with the 4 things we don't do, because if you don't give the most attention to this, you won't be able to do the other things. These things are sneaky. And yeah, this is our technique for showing up with teenage boys, but you can use this in all of your relationships and have things get better. So here's the things that we don't do. We don't fix. We don't try to fix the boys. You know, a lot of people are trying to fix them. That's an alienating feeling. They're not broken. You know, they're okay. They have the power. They're all right. We don't rescue them. We don't try to deliver them out of their circumstances. We don't advise. We don't project. You know, we don't try to figure out our own stuff by putting it all on them. We don't do that. You know, if we have more time, and we do in our all-day workshops, we get way more into this. But fixing, rescuing, advising, and projecting, those come from not believing in somebody. If I don't believe in you and your ability to solve your problems, you can believe I'm going to try to solve them for you. Why? Because I don't know if you can do it. But when I know you can do it, I don't need to solve your problems. I need to love you. I need to listen. I need to hang in there. I need to walk with you. I need to validate you. I might need to hold up a mirror to you so you can see how powerful you are, but I don't need to fix your problems for you. And this right here is radical work, to stop trying to fix, rescue, and advise in your life. I mean, I just say it, you know, I try to put this to work in my life, and it's hard. It's really hard. It's an all-day job right there. Here's the things that we do. We listen, we accept, we model, and we bless, and we do it in that order. We listen, and we don't listen to fix, rescue, advise, project. We listen to hear. I didn't know that. Tell me more. Wow. Okay, go on. Right? Truly listening. We accept. It's all welcome. There's nothing you can tell us that makes you wrong, out of bounds, or bad. Some of what you say might scare me. I might tell you why it scares me. It might hurt me. It might make me sad. We can share those things. But it's all welcome here. This is a place where you're totally welcome. And that's radical for a lot of these kids. We model. You know, we're attentive to how we're showing up. And last, we bless. And blessing, you know, it's just about being on the lookout. Some people say catch on being good. Being on the lookout for those strengths and that courage that they might not even know they have coming on. He might tell a story, and I'm just like, wow, bro. It takes a lot of courage to go through that. And just helping them to see how well they're doing. And just with this little principles, men showing up every week for the boys in this community, we get a lot done. Let me get into a few things here real quick, and we're going to check out. We're in the home stretch. You guys are doing great, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of zooming around. So let me get back over here and just tell you about the things Boys to Men's doing in case it is helpful, interesting to you. So right now, we are doing regular online circles. So you'll see right here on Wednesdays, we got an open boys circle at 3 o'clock every single week. Sometimes it's 1 or 2 boys. Sometimes it's a lot of boys. Their home lives don't necessarily lend it to being able to get on a Zoom call. You know, like we hate Zoom calls, but they got a lot going on. So it's not always easy, but we hold the space for them. And even sometimes when it's just a couple of guys, some really righteous things happen on there. We do it on Thursdays. We're holding open community men's circles. In fact, we have one next Tuesday. Some of y'all have been on it. It's just a chance to come in and show up as your whole self. You'll have anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to be real about what's going on, ask for help, get support, show up for other men. And again, it's just promoting that healthy masculinity in the community. Men letting their guards down and saying this is okay to be whole with one another and making that normal. It's a good place to do our own work, get support. We're doing trainings and workshops. So that's all stuff. You can find it on our social media. We can share it with you. A few other things I just want to lift up for you. We are doing a little Boys to Men book club. That the author, Bell Hooks, who I quoted, she wrote this book, The Will to Change, Men, Masculinity, and Love. It's a wild ride for some men. It's an awesome book. I really love it. You know, even if you don't love all of it, there's useful things in it. A lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us are bored right now, you know, and it's a good time to grow and develop. So if it's anything you're interested in, you can get on that. If you are interested, I have free copies to give away, like Oprah. And I also have digital copies if you like a digital copy. But I give stuff away. This next thing on June 26th, this was supposed to happen in April, and coronavirus, of course, shut it down like everything else. We have planned to do a screening of this film, The Mask You Live In. It's beautiful. It's a lot of the stuff we've talked about today. It follows high school boys and just really looks at what does the pressure around trying to be a man in the eyes of their buddies, how does it interact with their mental health. It's a beautiful movie. This gentleman, Ashanti Branch, his work is featured in the film. He's a real national leader on these conversations. And for now, the plan is for Ashanti to fly into Tucson and to spend the day with us. And we'll watch the film together, and we'll have a facilitated conversation with him when it's over. Of course, as we all know, there's a good chance that's not going to happen in person. And then it's all going to happen online, just like this. But just so you know, the original plan was to do it in person. If it doesn't, we'll still do it online, and it'll still be good. That's also on our Facebook event page. A way that you can support us is by going to our Facebook event page and just going to community and inviting people to like our page. That helps us get our message out. So that's it for our workshop. What we're going to do is we're going to check out.
When you need a hand, we all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need